tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. One of the answers is a reference to a sutta which many of you will know, where Venerable Ananda says, "It is wonderful, Lord, it is marvelous," speaking to the Buddha. "It strikes me that Kalyanamitta is half of the holy life." And the Buddha says, "No, Venerable Ananda, it is whole of the holy life." And in that, he's also referencing, this is because I, the Buddha, am a spiritual friend to sentient beings. So there's a place for solitude in practice. There is a place for coming back to that potential for awakening in these teachings that the Buddha gave us as a spiritual friend. And that sutta highlights the importance of community and of this term on our path. And it's interesting watching a spiritual community form, because you see the potential beauty and brightness in it, and then you see the same old patterns of in and out, popular, unpopular cliques, a certain constrictedness of spirit manifest because we're all human. And so there's an important role for remembering what Kalyanamitta means and rededicating ourselves to shaping this space in this community to hold that most precious of jewels of Kalyanamitta. There's a term in, the term genius is different in Greek. It initially or originally meant the spirit, the animating spirit of a place. It's genius. And it was also the piece of a being or a place which emerged in its fullness. The genius of a swan comes when it steps into the water, not so much when it's waddling on the land. And that word genius is so important, because what you find in these spaces of Kalyanamitta, spiritual community, is that because Kalyanamitta is not predicated on how well your particular personality gets along with another or your ability to have a good time, but rather on, as many said, your ability and commitment to supporting one another on the path in wholesome qualities and abandoning unwholesome qualities. That there is a space and grace and hospitality and inclusivity that allows the genius of each person to emerge in a way that it never has before in their lives. I know many in the course of my years as a monk and in this community as well, who maybe are people who, if you'd met on the street or in another context, you would have dismissed as not your type, not interested, or perhaps your eyes would have just slid over them a little bit. And what you see is when they're here, held with care and grace and an eye towards their genius, that their full wingspan emerges, and a brightness of spirit that was waiting to be seen comes. This is what we can hold for one another in this space. And I think of it often as strings. Some of you have heard me invoke this image before, where worldly relationship is often like two entangled strings. There's a push and pull of dynamic. There's an entangledness. Dharmic friendship, Kalyanamitta, is more like what is referred to in music as sympathetic resonance, where in a symphony or an orchestra, if you pluck the string of one instrument, all the strings on all the instruments around tuned to the same note will resonate just a little bit, and you'll hear a hum. This is the gentle note of Kalyanamitta, where you're all touching a similar note and path internally. We had a community member who once said, "I've never felt closer to anyone than these people. And yet when I leave, I don't miss them." And that sounds monstrous from a worldly perspective. But it's true. There's a sense of not having parted. I remember when I went to Thailand as a monk, the people I would call who were still walking, this path of spiritual growth and dedication, there was never a sense that we'd missed each other. We were still tuned to that same note. And I think you know this also by when the Buddha teaches a discourse and someone is inspired, they say, "It's wonderful, it's marvelous, Lord. It's as if what had been turned upside down has been turned upright, as if what had been covered has been revealed, as if a person had lit a lamp for those with eyes to see shapes in the dark." And in each of those situations, there's not a sense of something new being given to you, either by teaching or community, but rather of recognition, something you've known, a home you've come back to, homecoming. One of the words for cessation in Buddhism, atangama, means settling or coming home. We're walking each other home. And so that sense when you meet someone on this path, and there's just a sense of, oh, hey, I've never met you before, but you again, and you can chalk that up to karmic resonance or past lives. I like to, but also there's just a sense you're tuned to the same note. And so what this means, and it's interesting as a monk, when people will be like, "Is Ajahn Kovilo your best friend?" I love Ajahn Kovilo, but there's something very ugly about that word special friend, best friend. There's just, not very ugly, but it just doesn't quite sit right anymore. Because we're all brothers and sisters on this path. And we're aligned in Dhamma. And in a sense, in this community, everyone's special and no one's special. And that is beautiful. It really is. And what that means is it takes a very careful eye, and you'll see, obviously, this come out in your own interaction with this community. You'll see, the classic judging of who's in and who's out, who's popular, who's not, who do I give time to, who do I not. I have a careful curated meditation group at home. I could invite that person, but they talk a lot, or they breathe loudly, or they're a little awkward. We all have those dynamics. And to know that in these spaces, I can't tell you how many times that question has come up of like, oh, I have a great, I'm going to the retreat, I have a nice little car ride planned, I have room for one more. I see that person kind of forlornly hanging out over in the corner, but it's a really nice car full of people. I don't know if I want to mess with that dynamic. And every time that you just pull in and go with your initial plan, at least for me, I think 100% of the time, there's a sense you've narrowed your heart and you've missed the boat. And so time and again now this phrase rings out in my mind of like, never be stingy with the Dhamma. Never be stingy with the Dhamma. You always, almost always, there's some space for, times when you have, constraints on who you invite to things, etc., obviously. But in general, when I've opened the heart, when you just invite the person, it's beautiful. And you sense you've touched the route you were supposed to walk through Dhamma. I think the Thais set this example very well. There's an inclusivity, an openness, a hospitality, a warmth, a playfulness. And so I think that's just very important to keep in mind as we create this space of remembering sympathetic resonance, Kalyanamitta. There's a rule in the Vinaya that we aren't allowed to arrange group meals. When there's 4 monastics or more going to a meal, we can't decide who to invite. We actually have to put it up for lottery, or do kind of randomized, or a different way of kind of including everyone. So, you can hold that with wisdom, but just consider, like, if you do have a group of people you really feel comfortable with, what would it mean just to make room for a few people you haven't invited before? What would it mean to, like, pay attention to the person you've been dismissing a little bit in conversation? This is a space where you give a gift of letting someone emerge in a way they maybe never have in their whole life, because there are very few spaces like this where the quiet souls, the quiet chittas with deep wings, with broad wingspans, can spread them fully. There's hidden bodhisattvas all around us. And the Buddha said when he was talking to, he goes to, in this one sutta, he asks these monks who are living together how they live in concord. And they say, I think how wonderful it is that I have such spiritual companions to live the holy life with. We gaze at each other with kindly eyes, mixing like milk and water, and think, why don't I put aside what I want to do and do what these venerable ones want to do? Doing so, we live in concord. And when the Buddha laid out the 6 kind of guidelines for spiritual community called the Kosambhya Sutta, he said, one dwells cultivating acts of loving kindness towards one's companions in the spiritual life by body, speech, and mind. One dwells with virtue in tune with one's spiritual companions. When one receives gains righteously gained, one does not partake of them without first having shared with one's spiritual companions. And one shares right view with one's spiritual companions, right view which is onward leading, penetrating, leading to the ending of stress and suffering. And then he gives 7 qualities of that, which we'll touch later. But that first of loving kindness towards through acts of body, both in public and private. Some of you will know this story where the Buddha was walking with Venerable Ananda, and they come across a sick monk covered in vomit and his own fluids. And they ask why no other Sangha members had been caring for them. And they say, he wasn't that liked in the community. And the Buddha and Venerable Ananda lift him onto a bed and care for him. And the Buddha says to Venerable Ananda, remember, Venerable Ananda, for any of you who care for the sick, you care for me. It's as if you care for me. Can we have a community where when you hear someone is ill, and there are many in this community who are moving through illness, or ill in spirit and going through difficulty, can we have a community where the first thing you do is offer to cook them a casserole? Casseroles apparently are the go-to for grief food. I don't know why. Or a pie, or just your first reaction. And you'll know that your practice is gaining momentum when the first reaction you have to receiving a gift is, who can I give it to? Or when you hear someone sick, how can I help? Can that be this community? We have people here who have come across people in the community who've been out of a place to live and immediately offered them a place to stay. I can think of 2 right now. What would it mean to have that ethos? You have Venerable Sariputta, and many don't know this, but Venerable Sariputta, the Buddha's foremost disciple in wisdom, he would stay back from alms round sometimes just to sweep the monastery quietly. This is the Buddha's right-hand man. He's literally on the right usually. And he would stay back and just quietly try to sweep up so that none of the lay people who visited the monastery would lose faith. What would it mean to see these quiet acts of loving kindness done? One maintains verbal acts of loving kindness towards one's spiritual companions, both in public and private. The second quality. So gossip. This is, I think, the great Achilles heel of maybe all human communities. But certainly Buddhist communities are subject to the same. Saint Teresa of Avila was known for never saying something around another person that she would not say to their face. Venerable Satima has taken that on for this period as well, another bhikkhuni at Parayana. Joseph, or Longpa Pasano is known for never speaking about others in a way that would leave the slightest mark. And you'll notice, yeah, there's a juiciness to gossip, but if they're gossiping about someone with you, what are they saying about you? And that trust you can gain in someone who, when you kind of, just lay out the gentle invitation for like, oh, I heard, and they don't respond, and you clearly, this person does not gossip, how safe you feel knowing that they hold you with that same spirit. And so there are times, there are times when you have concern about someone or you're dealing with a difficult situation and need feedback where you need to ask another person for advice, but you can frame those moments carefully. Say, I usually don't speak about people behind their back, but I really genuinely need some help right now, or I'm concerned. Frame it and then put it down. But what would it mean to have a community where we don't gossip? And there's an element where we all have those gossipy kind of friends, and there's a sense where you can let them talk, but you don't really say anything back, but you get all the goods without having, sullied your own karma at all, right? It's like gossip by proxy. What would it mean to stay back from that even a little bit? It is so beautiful. It is a thunderclap when you have someone in a spiritual community. You can't do this with everyone in your life, obviously. Some are on a different page. But where you just bring up a good quality, be like, actually, I saw that person do something really beautiful last week, and the person you're talking to will get the message. I'm not interested. There's a sutta called the Saparisa Sutta, where the Buddha says, a true person, when asked about their own good qualities, holds back. When pressed with questions, they speak little, holding back. When asked about their own bad qualities, they speak in full, without restraint, or without holding back. We all have to hold that somewhat carefully and with wisdom. A true person, when asked about another's bad qualities, holds back. When pressed with questions, they speak little. When a true person is asked about another person's good qualities, they speak in full, not holding back. Lean against the wind with this. Epictetus of the Greeks said that if someone tells you that someone has spoken badly of you, say, they only said that much? If they'd known all my bad qualities, they would have said a lot more. I love that. Obviously, you don't want to invoke a false humility, but what does it mean to really hold back with that humbleness and praise another? Praise another. If you have someone in your life who is a really gossipy person and you find this extremely difficult, you can use a skillful means, say, look, I'm really trying not to speak about others behind their back. Could you help me with that? Could you, if you hear me kind of gossiping, call me on it? And really you're talking about them a little bit, but maybe they'll get the message of like, okay, we're holding each other to this standard now. This is really important in this community for us to feel safe. When anger comes up, to give feedback using the conditions for admonishment. I've mentioned this before. In the Vinaya, in the monastic code, we're not allowed to give admonishment, feedback to another monastic, usually unless we've fulfilled 15 conditions. There's a lot. There's like 3 different lists of 5. The 2 ones I want to hold up now are speaking from a mind of loving kindness and asking and receiving permission. Can we hold that much in this community? Because those 2 firewalls will change everything. I know one monastic who's had to wait a whole year before having a mind of loving kindness. But usually it won't take that long. Usually it's just wait 15 minutes until that splinter of annoyance is gone. Because people will sense if you have that in you, and it'll change the whole conversation. Wait until you can speak from loving kindness with each other. Be curious. Be gentle. Understand that often you don't need to call someone on something right away. We're mindful in this community. Usually give people a chance, ask them questions, or just give them a chance to see it of their own accord, and trust mindfulness too. Verbal acts of loving kindness. And mental acts of loving kindness in public and private. I've never really known what public acts of mental unkindness means in this case, but in terms of how you hold this, I really think of this when you have someone in the community who is difficult, like Venerable Silananda said, who's our teacher without us necessarily having asked for them to be our teacher. Can you remember, I need to maintain mental acts of loving kindness towards these companions? And don't think of them necessarily as your friend in that moment. Think of them as your brother or your sister in the Dharma. And the goal and one of the purposes of your family is to show you where your buttons are. And that's something we do for each other. Thank goodness. But it's done in a space of safety with people you can talk with. There's a crucible at work in this gym now, in this community, where we have a chance to truly purify our hearts together, but that it happens in relationship. So have gratitude for that. I've mentioned this before, but the Sufi teacher Gurdjieff, who, there was one very difficult person in his community, and one day he was gone, and this person just got on everyone's nerves too much, and they chased him away. And Gurdjieff returned and said, where's this person? And they said, oh, he just went too far. We told him to leave. And Gurdjieff said, that person has the particularly unique quality of making everyone around him angry. I pay him to be here. We need to go get him. There's a teaching in the Mahayana that the bodhisattvas split off part of their chittas and send them down as the difficult boss or the friend or the situation to push and teach us. This is how we can think of those. And with compassion, because if someone is bringing a lot of suffering into a space, then they'll be suffering too. Maintain acts of loving kindness. And as Ajahn Kovilo referenced a few weeks ago, part of our practice can also be dedicating the goodness of our lives to those we love and in this community. Are you holding a few people in this community in your heart and telling them that you're thinking of them? Because there's people in this community, I guarantee, who can use that right now. We have people who've just recovered from cancer, who've just come down with cancer, been diagnosed with it, who've lost mothers, who have children who are going through addiction. Can we hold them? Next one dwells with sila, virtue in tune. And just supporting one another in holding to a standard of virtue which is truly unique in the world. And know that when you hold your own sila purely, your own virtue, you set an example that will touch those around you. And really considering supporting one another in that through either getting a confession partner. Confession's a loaded term, but it's called opening in Buddhism, where every 2 weeks, Ajahn Kovilo and I do this. We encourage people to do it on our Discord server. We have a whole formula where you open your heart and air the dusty corners and say the things that you wish you'd done a little more beautifully and rejoice in the things you did beautifully. What would it mean to open that hand to one another, or just to a Buddha image at least? And the fifth aspect, where the Buddha says that one does not partake of gains righteously gained without first sharing with one's companions. I know I have a monk friend who lived in Japan, who said in Japan, this aspect of giving is so deeply ingrained. If you walk into someone's house and compliment a painting on the wall, there's roughly a 50% chance they'll take it down and try to give it to you. But what would it mean to really take the Buddha's words seriously when he says, if beings only knew, as I knew, the fruits of giving, they never would eat without having first given. Not if it was their last mouthful, they would not eat without first having given if there was someone to give to. But because beings do not know, as I know, the fruits of giving, they eat without having given, and stinginess overcomes their mind. So just making a habit of giving to one another, train it. You'll notice whenever Ajahn Kovilo and we invite other monastics, we have gifts for them. I have gifts for both of you. They're hidden behind the shoji screen. But what would it mean to have that? Or whenever you come, you don't have to bring a big dish for the potluck, but just maybe make 2 PB&J sandwiches and cut them into little squares. Just something. Come with something. What would it mean to come with something? To give a little bit. And when that impulse comes, I could give this, then give it. Ajahn Chah says sometimes it requires a little bit of fierceness, like you have 2 apples, you want to keep the big apple, but give the big apple. He says, give it. Give the big apple. And he grunts like that. It's in there. That's a quote. It's better in Thai. But for this community to have that quality of, and you really see when this has been trained, we have someone here who on Mother's Day brought, I think, 10 different bouquets of flowers to give out, who's dedicated their first paycheck to 5 grandmothers back in their home country and an orphanage. Give and trust that quality of letting go. It is the first on the list of paramitas, spiritual perfections, and it is the last that the Buddha perfected. It is relinquishment of self at its most profound level from the beginning to the end. Give. And if you are about to order that Amazon item, what would it mean just to change the address to a friend's, And part of that is hospitality. The Buddha said there's 6 objects of reverence: the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, training, heedfulness, and hospitality, receiving guests. And I love how he adds that 5th, because we can get so fixated on the first 5 with just, we're doing our own practice, this person's getting in the way. I remember as a young monk at Majjhima, where I ordained, I would be kind of devoting myself to my own meditation, but I was the guest monk. And then we'd learned that 15 people had come unannounced from Malaysia for a retreat, and my job was for a week to just look after all of them. And there's a part of a young monk's mind which does not rejoice, leap up, and grow confident in such news. But if you turn your heart completely to my practice now is making someone feel as cared for as I can, this is sacred, it was the most brightening experience. And then when I went to visit another monastery, I somehow ended up in the abbot's kuti, and I feel like that was karma. So trust this aspect of hospitality. So if you aren't opening up your home once every 2 weeks, can you do that? Can you open up and feed people? Can you make room in your gatherings for those who you might not otherwise? If you haven't signed up for our hospitality and house sitting WhatsApp group, consider it, because if this monastery thing is going to work out, we need people to host people. It is such a gift. I know it's an ask, and this is the thing, is true dana often hurts a little bit. It's how you know you're really pushing the edge. When I'm packing for a trip, I think many of you know the sense, you come to the point of your baggage where you're like, ooh, any more gifts, and this is going to be awkward. Push past that, always a little bit, stretch. Find what you're stingy with. Is it time? Is it attention? Is it the spotlight? Give that away. Is it your sense of, this is my home and this is my sacred space? Can you open it and invoke that sanctity which is deeper? Where is your trigger point? Where is yourself hiding? And challenge that by giving. We want a community where if someone posts that they're coming to Seattle, we have 5 or 6 people offer their homes immediately. And you will find there's huge brightness. These are amazing people who are coming to us. Can you open your home? Can you open your heart? Can you open the car ride? Can you open the group which you've cultivated a little bit to others? Sympathetic resonance, a deeper song. And finally, the 6th quality is right view, which is shared towards the ending of suffering. And this is the fact that we're all walking the same path here, supporting each other on it. And I think this is why so many communes failed, is they didn't have this shared right view. And when the Buddha outlines this, he talks about one with right view considers, do I have the character of one with right view? What is the character of one with right view? Just as a mother cow would always know, even as she was grazing, where her calf was, even so, as one goes about one's daily tasks, one does not lose their respect and care for her training in the higher mind. Even as you do your tasks, can you always be thinking of this path? Someone has thought of the Buddhanusati, recollection of the Buddha, as how a mother always is thinking a little bit of her child. This is always in your heart. Or the Buddha says, one says, do I have the character of one with right view? Just as a tender infant would draw back their foot or hand from a flame, Even so, if one transgresses virtue, their precepts, one immediately opens their heart to another companion in the holy life and confesses it. What does it mean where when you see, oh, I did something unbeautiful there, you immediately go to someone you trust and just open yourself to them? This is embarrassing, but it's fun if you have someone you trust. It opens no dusty corners. And then the Buddha says the strength of one of right view is that when the Dharma taught by the Blessed One is being taught, one lends ear and gains joy in that teaching. And I love that our strength as Dharma practitioners is our love of hearing the Dhamma. And that can be listening to a talk, but it can be hearing and looking for the Dhamma in each of us, around us. There's Dharma speaking in each person here. How can you find that and hold it with care? And if we keep with care this spiritual community and create this architecture of faith, then the monastery itself will take care of itself physically. But this is what's precious, be it in a gym or North Bend. So I'm wishing you all the best.
Handamayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Dhammase.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. So we have time for some questions or comments. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll have a mic over to you. Or if you're on Zoom, you can raise your cartoon hand. And this we get to open up to Silananda and Kema as well. Don't be too shy because we admonished you at the beginning of this gathering. That's not right. It's okay. You can raise your hands, just being mindful.
Hello, thank you so much for the talk and the meditation. They both were beautiful. My question is for Venerable Silananda. When you were talking about the friends and teachers and parents and everyone that has supported you in your life, I really started feeling like that gratitude and just joy for everything that they've given me. And it somehow became, oh, they are right here. Like I can feel that these two nice gentlemen next to me are my friends, sort of already. So I was wondering if that sounds useful to you as a practice when you're not on the couch, or how is it that you practice with this? Thank you.
Are you related to the two men next to you? Okay, just checking. I remember the first time I realized the power of this meditation. I went to the airport to get on a flight, and the whole experience was blissful because I could see like how all the people around me were helping to make that possible. And yeah, everywhere I looked, I saw kindness, I saw cooperation, generosity, and believe me, that was not my previous experience at the airport. It was always like, how can I get through this as quickly as possible? How can I maximize my comfort? How can I get away from the annoying people? Things like that. But I think, to your question, yeah, if you do this meditation a lot, it starts to pervade your space. And so anywhere you enter into, you automatically pick up on acts of goodwill. And I'm sure the two gentlemen next to you are very well behaved, and maybe even smiled at you. But even if they didn't, like they've taken the time out this morning to come to a gathering where people are creating virtues. So that is definitely something to notice and to rejoice in. So I think that, yeah, that's exactly kind of the effect that this meditation can have. It radiates outwards, this perception of kindness all around you. And it seems to have no limits, actually. Like sometimes I stare at the carpet and I'm like, somebody designed that pattern. Like I've been staring at it actually for the past hour, but someone put thought into it. And the whole purpose is to like prevent your feet from being cold. So it's like really profound. So I'm really glad you had that experience.
Thanks both for the talk and the meditation. As I think about some of the practices that were shared today, I find them to be really easy in this setting and in this community, but when I think about leaving this community, they become a little less easy. Particularly, Ajahn, you made this point on right view. For those who may not be on the path or have right view, practicing these things in a communal sense can sometimes introduce tension, where I want to invite the maximum number of people, but if we don't all share the same views, there could be some tension in a group. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great question. I think there's those in our lives who, have different values than us, and who we have no choice but to have time with and spend time with. And I really think with many like that, holding these virtuous, the word for good or kind of goodness of a kind in Buddhism is kusala, which means skillfulness, skill. Because it's an acquired skill that you have to cultivate. Like, how do you navigate in the world that does not support these values without gossiping, without compromising your own sense of integrity? And it takes some really skillful means that are sometimes a little playful and sometimes creative. One thing is, you will find as you practice, your path begins to diverge a bit from old friendships. It just does. And one thing I've recommended is, instead of trying to juggle a bunch of coffee dates or something with old friends who maybe you don't resonate with in the same way, see if you can batch all those friends into like 1 or 2 dinners a month or something, and bring them all together, and then just give and trust that note of giving to drown out any sort of discord and just be brightening and honor those relationships, because cutting it off often is not the right decision. And with others who, and obviously there shouldn't be judgment here, like we're all on different paths. But it is worth acknowledging who's supporting our values. And so with those that we're inevitably in a lot of contact with, family or certain coworkers or friends, I really find it almost like a game, like, how can I find their dharmic language, and not compromise my own sila, be silent at the right times, or steer the conversation correctly, or kind of joke a little bit, or how can I ask questions that lead them to talk about something that's really actually meaningful to them as well. So yeah, it is difficult. And when I say, try to include a lot of people, who wouldn't otherwise be included in a gathering, I mean people whose values align. Like the Buddha did say, associate with wise people. It is okay to be distinguishing those people in your life to some extent. And hold this very lightly. We don't want to judge. It's just some people will support these qualities in your life, and you want to draw near them. So don't know if that answered the question at all. Okay. Whenever the Buddha lays out often a kind of idea like one dwells with virtue, he always adds this, or usually, and one does not exalt oneself and disparage others. So just always keeping that in mind, even while we make distinctions between who we want to spend time with a lot. Yeah, in the back there. Sorry, what were you going to say? Please, you're closer there, actually.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajahn. Thank you for the meditation and the talk. It was really good. I was able to connect to a part of me that has been struggling with the person I love the most, my mother, but who is the person who challenged me the most. And actually, yesterday, when sharing with a couple of Kalyanamitas, we were sharing this struggle. Our biggest teachers, and how I see it with my mother, the one who challenged me the most with my patience is my mom. And they have the same struggle, how to cultivate the growth, the support, and asking for that support from these spiritual friends instead of just complaining and trauma dumping on them. Thank you.
So can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. Is it how to talk?
How to cultivate growth with these Kalyana how to, not just to trauma dump, not just to share the complaining about our people, but also ask for the support and growth together.
I think if you frame it like you just did, it would really set the tone for the whole interaction. And the fact that you're talking to Kalyana Mitas already, you're with a group that understands what's skillful speech, what's unskillful speech, and they probably have a good motivation of wanting to help, not wanting to harm you or your mother. But I really liked what Ajahn Nisabho said about kind of owning whatever difficulty you're having with somebody. You could say, yeah, I don't want to gossip or slander, but I'm struggling right now and I'm needing some support. So, explaining to them where you're coming from, asking, are you able to help me with this? Maybe they're not. Maybe they're also struggling with their mother or at the time. So just, being very clear about your intention, and the fact that you're already talking to a group of spiritual friends, I think that's a really great place to start. And I think that's about it.
One more, and we'll just make Alex run all the way over. Could we also have the two men who are sitting next to Jeanette stand, just so we can see if you are indeed well behaved? Good. Yes, all right. Yeah, they check out.
This is kind of a follow-up question to the previous question. How do you know when you're in a relationship with somebody, whether that's a friend or not, and it's gotten to the point where a majority of the relationship is you practicing your patience, and so in a way, they're helping you along that journey, but at what point is it appropriate, or what signs do you see in yourself where it would be for the best to maybe cut ties, because just considering boundaries at a certain point, it can only practice so much, and it's just a touchy kind of balance. So just looking for some guidance as to when is it appropriate to, kind of step back.
That's a great question. I think Ajahn Amaro compares our interaction with the world to sharpening a knife, where you balance seclusion and interaction, or say immersion in spiritual friendship with sort of interaction with other notes and people. Where if the angle of the blade is too shallow and you're just pulling away and kind of coming into yourself all the time, there's no sharpening. But if the angle's too sharp and you're always kind of interacting too much where you can't maintain mindfulness, then it, dulls the blade too. So you need to get the right angle. And I think a really healthy metric for that is, in the long term, am I able to maintain a sense of kind of centeredness here, a sense of my own kind of, center of gravity. And with some interactions, what I find is there's a point where you are working with something, and then there's a point where it begins to take up residence in you, the dynamic. The sankhara is almost becoming crusted in you, and that's not a good sign. And I think really noticing when you need to take a step back in those cases. And you'll also notice there's certain points, say with family especially, where you won't really be able to tell where your defilements begin and theirs begin. The tentacles are just tangled, and it's like a mess. And in those situations, like knowing, okay, I might need a little distance until I can see where my realm of responsibility ends and theirs begins again, and can maintain that level of sila. I would say that cutting things off with radio silence often requires a huge amount of energy to sustain. It takes huge energy to sustain radio silence with family or something. And so to be really cautious with that move. But there are chances for that. But there's also chances for like skillful boundaries or playful ones. Just saying, establishing a clear agreement between you. Like if you talk to me in this way, I'm not gonna, I'll just leave. That's sort of a boundary that we're agreeing to together. And if it happens, then you can invoke it in the future. Or some kind of playful, skillful means where it's like, look, for every time you kind of snap at me, you've got to watch this movie with me that you hate, but I really like. Sorry, and I'm keeping tab. Just like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down sometimes. But yeah, we are not doormats here. It's important to know how to draw boundaries. Yeah. Anything to add, either of you? Okay.
Yeah, I think, Ajahn, you focused on really knowing your own limits, your own capacity, and I would put the focus there, and being really honest. Sometimes we can't handle things that we think we should be able to, or that we used to be able to. So to just, provide ourselves with compassion, understanding in these situations, it's quite difficult for us. So to, not be afraid to say this is too much. But also your question, it made me think that sometimes we don't know the answer to something unless we kind of experiment. Like we have to kind of try different approaches, different strategies. And me, that always makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I want to know what's the one right way to do something, but sometimes there isn't. And it's a dynamic. The other person, has many different sides as well. So it's a matter of like being willing to, see things from a different angle and then try something out, but really taking care of ourselves in the process, and just really knowing our own heart, mind, and whether it's getting too much, and being willing to step back, but keeping our heart open if you're able to engage in the future, always leaving that as a possibility.